All right, welcome, PortConMaine at home. We are here today to talk soup. We have one burning question to ask. Some people on the Patreon are already discussing. So, if you are a part of the Patreon or would you like to join the discussion and voting process, go to patreon.com/PortConMaine and you can see the topic going that's apparently raging already on this very subject. My name is Brian. I typically work in guest staff at PortCon, and I am joined here by Ian. So, Ian, what do you usually staff?
I am one of the art chairs for the Artist Alley. I'm usually one of the people that you find behind that staff table.
Okay, and joining on the other side of the argument will be Tom. Tom, what do you do at PortCon?
I am also on art staff, but in general, I am a soup enthusiast.
Soup enthusiast. He has the appropriate hair for this discussion today.
Yep.
He does.
So, today's discussion is cereal soup? So, in going through this discussion today, we are going to go through some of the definitions of soup and other soup related terms. And Ian is going. What are you arguing, Ian?
I am arguing for this debate that cereal is not soup.
Tom, that means you are arguing what?
Disappointed.
Oh, I'm arguing that cereal is definitely soup.
Cereal is soup. So, in a moment, I know I'm springing this on you guys right now. We didn't talk about this in the pregame. I'd like to provide you a 2-minute statement based on your argument. It's totally improvised.
Yeah.
Just to kind of lay down what you're going to go through on during your argument and how you're going to convince the audience to vote on the patreon.com/PortConMaine poll that we have going on there. So we're going to start with, let's do a coin flip, huh?
Oh, crap.
So I have this bull moose pin.
You're gonna
I'm gonna
flip
flip
a pin?
Flip a pin.
Not even...
It's got a back to it, so it's going to be very not fair. So we're gonna call this heads and this tails. Ian, I'm gonna let you call it.
I will call...
All right, ready?
I will call tails.
Tails? Okay.
Yep.
It's heads. So, Tom, that means Tom, you can go first.
Been funny to accidentally stab yourself with that pin.
Yeah, you thought you'd be able to choose, right?
I would have chosen you to go first anyway, so...
All right, so Tom, 2 minutes starting now.
Well, this won't even take 2 minutes. The definition of soup used for this debate and generally everywhere is incomplete and too vague to actually define what soup is. And I will go through point by point how it is too vague and where you can sort of fit other things in there that you wouldn't otherwise expect into the category of soup, including cereal, both with and without milk.
All right, Tom, you have about 1 minute and 20 seconds left to fill.
I don't need anything else. That's it.
I didn't say it was optional. I said you have to fill the 2 minutes.
Well,
This is some great content
it's
right
going to
here.
be great.
This is what the people have paid for.
All right, so, just kidding. All right, Ian,
Yeah.
starting now.
I am going to argue that the definition of soup is not that vague and does adequately describe what generally encompasses the dish of soup, and that the classic dish of cereal with milk does not fit that definition. And for my remaining time, I will now dance. No. I do want to sort of open this up and explain to the good people how the hell this came about. This would be, as we all know, the weekend leading into PortCon. This would be the day that the truck is packed and dropped off at the hotel for setup. So just imagine that it's actually Thursday, tomorrow. and you've been at PortCon for that first day, and you need some dinner at the end of that day. Everything's closed, everything's good. You're not interested in going to the hentai panel, so you're going to go get some dinner. You decide to go to your local Sebago Brewing Company, who in no way is a sponsor or has any stake in PortCon whatsoever. And you go, and in the front room with all the high top tables is a group of people who at first glance look like they're having a really good time.
Wasn't it at Slab?
It's been at Slab too. We've actually had this debate basically at every restaurant we've ever been to together. But this group of people over in that front room, they look like they're having a good time. There's a bunch of potato nachos and dumplings, and everybody looks good. But then you notice that no one at the table is having a good time. Because there are two idiots sitting in the middle arguing about what the hell soup is.
I remember walking in on the conversation at Slab, and you guys were like already into it, and then I just asked like, well, what's the definition of soup? And nobody could tell me. It was like, okay, we're having this argument without any knowledge of the actual definition of soup, and we're trying to decide what soup is. Like, you can look it up. So, having said that, let's start with the definitions of soup.
Now that
we're going to be using.
We've looked it up.
Yeah. So some important things we're going to note are we're going to start off introducing the definitions of soup according to Merriam-Webster.com, and I'm going to also use Theodora.com, which has a culinary dictionary. So we're just going to use those two to start.
Switching it on us last minute.
Did it? I posted it. I thought in the chat.
We agreed on Britannica.
We agreed on nothing.
Hold on. Oh, okay. Well, I didn't want to bring up the article yet. So we're going to start with just these basic definitions, and I'll let you guys start.
Okay.
So the Merriam-Webster definition of soup is soup. Noun, soup, definition of soup. A liquid food, especially with a meat, fish, or vegetable stock as a base and often containing pieces of solid food. And then there are two others that are clearly not food. So that's our starting definition. You can look it up on Merriam-Webster.com if you want to read that to yourself. And then in Theodora, there's a very basic definition that says liquid, usually water or milk, in which solid foods have been cooked. Soups can be served hot or cold and may be thick, chunky, smooth, or thin. So, since we started with Tom in the hot pot first, we're going to start with Ian for the first statement towards your argument. Cereal is it soup? Go ahead, Ian.
All right. So, to my point, I think that both of those definitions actually serve my argument very well, especially the second one, in which the term cooked is used. And in the Merriam-Webster... You get your turn. You'll get your turn. Stop making those faces. In addition, the Merriam-Webster version also specifically mentions like stock or broth. And the way in which you make stock or broth is with heat. You take vegetables, bone, meat, what have you, and you cook it down and render off the fat and the flavor and all that sort of stuff. And the resulting liquid is your broth, after which you can then use to make a dish into soup. Doesn't matter if it ends up hot or cold, because as the definitions state, things like gazpacho, which I know we're going to bring up multiple friggin' times, is traditionally served cold, but it's started hot. It is not cooked cold. It is not prepared cold, but it is served cold. So,
all right, I'm going to call it right there. Yeah. End of debate. Thank you for tuning in. Oh, but seriously. All right, Tom, so do you have a rebuttal to that?
Yeah, so...
I was hoping you'd say no.
The definition of soup that is provided in both of these sources leaves out some key information. And it includes information that is not necessarily true in every case. As Ian just brought up, one of the best examples of this is gazpacho, which is an uncooked soup. It is served cold. It is not traditionally not cooked. It uses an uncooked base. So that right there, like, already throws a problem into the definition, right? If gazpacho is soup, which I will concede that in Spanish cookbooks, it is sometimes considered a salad in addition to a soup, but in majority of places, considered a soup. Things like tomato soup, which you think of, Campbell's most commonly, just out of a can or something, does not include solid foods which have been cooked in it. It is just tomato sauce. Like, there's no physical hard tomatoes in it. It's been liquefied. So the definitions that we're working off of that these places provide are not accurate. They don't encompass everything that can be considered soup.
All right, so Tom whipping up the fake news argument on the definitions of soup. So, Ian,
Yes.
Let's check in with the chat. How's it going over there in the voting poll at patreon.com?
Well, we are currently, despite my fantastic arguments, we are currently at 7 votes for cereal is soup, 4 for not soup. So regrettably, Tom is in the lead.
Tom is currently in the lead, so we're gonna keep referring to that vote. If you want to vote again, patreon.com/PortConMaine. Pitch in some money to help support the con itself, and also tell these two idiots which one is wrong and which one is right. So,
yeah, joining the Patreon will get you access to our Discord. The vote's right in there, in addition to a lot of other cool announcements and discussions that we got going on in there. So,
all right. So, to sum up so far, Ian is saying soup is typically cooked, whether it's just the broth or stock, but it's usually cooked even if served cold. And Tom is saying that the definitions that we are starting our argument on are not sufficient information to define certain things as or as not soup, with the gazpacho as the starring role in his defense here. So, Ian, let's take it from you at this point. What do you think?
I would like to refute Tom's argument vis-a-vis the tomato soup. Going again with one of the definitions that you dislike so much.
It's all right. It's not that I dislike them.
Hold on.
They just have problems.
Yes, I admit they do have problems. We need serious soup reform.
That is something we can both agree on.
We do. Really, we got to work on that. We need soup reform. But yeah, to the point of the Merriam-Webster definition that mentions the definition of soup, is that it often contains solid matter, but does not have to. There are a lot of soups that are basically just light broths. A lot of dessert soups or after-course soups. It's basically just a light broth with maybe some seasonings or something in there, but not exactly even like miso grade soup, which has stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so before we go over to Tom on that, things like bisque or bouillon are all considered soups, and those are pretty much just straight up the stock or broth for the most part. Bisque usually has something mixed in, such as is it cream cheese or some kind of cream?
Could
The
be
cream
like
of some sort.
lobster bisque, really popular.
There's too much information to try and absorb in building for this. So Tom, rebuttal.
I'm not actually sure what I'm rebuttaling because I agree with what Ian said about the definitions.
It doesn't necessarily contain solid stuff.
Yeah, yeah, I don't have anything else for that.
Okay, so do you want to start a new train of argument?
Sure. So to argue cereal is soup, you have to look at what makes a soup. What qualifies as a soup. Cold milk, we would generally not think of as a broth, or as a base. But you can, use it in soups such as chowders or, as Brian mentioned, bisques, things like that. And we know that there are cold soups like gazpacho. So why is a cold milk? Sorry, I should say cold uncooked soups like gazpacho. Why is cold uncooked milk not? Why does that not qualify as a base for a soup? And I could see an argument where you could say, well, you're adding the cereal afterwards to the milk, to the bowl of milk. That doesn't qualify it as a soup because they're not being made together. But you would put croutons in a soup. People frequently put croutons or crackers or something in with tomato soup or chicken noodle or chowders, and you still consider that soup. So when you put something in a bowl like that, into a soup, it becomes part of the soup. So putting cereal into the milk makes a dish that we call cereal, which is soup.
Get more, or all right, think about that. Ian, do you have an immediate?
I'm drawing a blank at the moment.
All right, Ian, do you have an immediate response to that?
Yes. Trying to remember the first part, but the second part, at least as far as the croutons go, croutons, oyster crackers, what have you. Yes, those are often part of a soup, but as a garnish, those are much like bacon flakes on basically everything. They're not specifically what makes the soup a soup. They're a nice texture difference, they're a nice additive, but if you have a soup without croutons, like a chowder without oyster crackers, it may be a bit boring, but it's still going to be a soup or a chowder. Like, removing that extra bit doesn't make it not soup anymore. Whereas, if you were to take a soup and then say, like, we'll use chicken noodle, classic example. If you were to remove the chicken, you couldn't call it chicken noodle soup. You then maybe call it noodle soup, so you remove the noodles, then you just have broth. Which you could still, per my earlier argument, also still call soup.
Exactly. So but I think that statement there actually reinforces what I was saying. Adding or removing substances from the base does not change that it is soup.
Okay. And I understand that counter argument, but if we were to take a bowl of cereal, like Lucky Charms, if you were to take the cereal, the marshmallows and the non-marshmallow bits that no one actually cares about, out of the milk, you then just have a bowl of milk, which, by almost no definition, is soup.
Except it is. Because we've already shown that you can have uncooked cold soup. And we've shown that you can have soup that is effectively just broth, or just the base.
Milk, I argue that milk does not fit the definition of broth, in that it is not prepared. Milk, while admittedly, especially standard milk that you get these days, is homogenized and pasteurized, goes through a lot of processes to make it safe.
I disagree with you. About the preparation of milk.
Yeah, like soup, or cereal, milk, words, in an order. Milk itself is not prepared. To use gazpacho, which you say is not a cooked soup, it is a cold prepared soup. There's still preparation involved. You still take a series of ingredients and combine them to make your base for the gazpacho. Milk you just squeeze out of a cow or a goat, and you're done with it, effectively.
I mean, you can be done with it, but most of the milk that we consume is highly prepared, processed, heated, cooled. It's
But it is not.
not raw milk.
No, and depending on, granted, whether or not you actually want to drink raw milk, totally up to you. Not really my thing, but you don't specifically have to prepare milk. And I still don't accept that pasteurization and homogenization is a preparation. It's an industrial process, ordered by the FDA.
But it's an industrial process to prepare the milk to be used.
But that preparation is not the preparation that goes into a dish. To use to move this even further, gazpacho made from tomatoes. Tomatoes are similarly prepared to milk in that they are picked, destemmed, washed. These are all things that you don't have to do to a tomato to eat it, but we do because they're safer.
Well, I mean, you don't have to. I'm not going to go. No. That's not an argument I want to make.
Oh.
Okay.
Mid thought.
All right. So we're starting to get into territory of what part of preparation counts as towards the cooking process. Seems like we're leaning that way, right?
It would seem.
So, what is the current standing at our patreon.com voting PortConMaine, Ian?
Regrettably, I am still losing. I am losing 4-8.
4-8. So one more vote for Tom so far.
Mm-hmm.
Tom's putting up a big case here. So at this point in the argument, I would like to present some new information, and that is the Merriam-Webster definition of cereal. So, cereal has two definitions. There's an adjective and a noun.
Wait. There is an adjective? I didn't see that.
There's an adjective on Merriam-Webster for cereal. And it says, relating to grain or to the plants that produce it, also made of grain. So maybe it's cerealized? I don't know. So the noun definition on Merriam-Webster is a plant such as a grass yielding starchy grain suitable for food, also its grain. And the second definition for the noun is a prepared foodstuff of grain such as oatmeal or cornflakes. So, adding that into our argument, Tom, do you want to start with this new information?
So this information opens a bigger door in this whole discussion of what actually is soup, what constitutes soup. If you make, say, like a minestrone, you cook it, you do all the preparation that you need to do, you put it in a container, and you freeze it till it's solid. Is it still soup? I would argue that yes, it is still soup. If you bring it to room temperature, or if you warm it up, it turns into a liquid which contains the soup. So anything that can be melted can be argued is soup. Anything, for example, you could argue that ice cream is a soup when it's melted. When it's frozen, it's a solid, but it does not stay a solid. It can become a liquid. Going from off of that, I would argue that anything similar, or I guess I should pose a question to Ian before I get to this. Would you consider potato salad a soup?
Okay. To that particular question, no, I would not. Though I don't. I want to focus on like soup and such. Like what goes into a salad is a whole nother thing that we could easily spend another 3 days on.
Yeah, but I'm asking.
But no, I do not
And
consider potato salad a soup.
but it is in a liquid that is prepared similarly to how milk is prepared. It contains, food that has been cooked. Generally, you cook the potatoes. Mayonnaise is a liquid. It's a highly viscous, stress yield liquid that will take the shape of its container, given enough time.
I disagree
So-
about your definition of preparing a potato salad versus preparing milk. Because again,
Well,
my
I'm
definition of preparing milk is you squeeze it out of a cow and you have milk. You don't
So
pull a potato out of the ground and now you have potato salad.
no, I guess what I'm arguing more so. Sorry, let me clarify that. Is the mayonnaise that you use in the potato salad
Mm-hmm.
is emulsified egg whites
Mm-hmm.
and some other things, which is a liquid which contains these other ingredients. Because we know that soups can be uncooked, you are preparing a potato potato soup, mayonnaise soup. Gross.
It is, but I follow you.
Which makes it, by definition, a soup. I think the thing that we disagree on the most about this, where I take a stand, where we would really draw the line on this definition, is the preparation aspect. I think any sort of preparation counts because there's not a minimum amount of preparation required for this. So to get to cereal, as in the grain being soup, if it can be melted or liquefied, it can count as being soup because it is able to be liquid form. So anything that can become liquid form, can be made into a liquid form, can be soup.
All right, so Ian, response.
I have a few responses to this. While I agree that melted ice cream can be considered a soup, the state of matter is not what makes it a soup, in my opinion. The ice cream was ice cream first. It was prepared as ice cream first, and then melted to make a soup. And your minestrone, or minestrone, I honestly do not know how to pronounce it. That's on me. Again, you prepared it. You cook minestrone. You prepare it, you cook it, and then if you freeze it for later, that's fine, and then thaw it out to make it... It never stopped being soup. The state of matter for what you do with your minestrone does not matter if it's soup or not, as long as it is not a vapor, because then you just have the crap that was in the minestrone, because then we remove the liquid aspect entirely.
Pause.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently it's minestrone.
Minestrone? Sick!
Yeah.
I've never heard anyone pronounce it that way. That's strange.
But I don't know if it was right. I mean, anyway. I will take any small victory whatsoever.
Let's not lose sight. It's not about minestrone, it's about soup. So continue, Ian.
So, and as far as if we're talking about melting things and whatnot, if you were again to take a bowl of cereal, just the cereal itself, no milk, freeze it, still frozen, you thaw that out again, it's still just a bunch of cereal. So the state of matter doesn't really change it.
But if you... sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's okay. And I do want to clarify one thing. It's actually come up in the voting chat a couple times. the we are specifically talking about. We all know, thanks to that definition of cereal. Cereal itself is just barley, corn, wheat. The grains themselves that go into making breakfast cereal. Sort of like a Kleenex situation. The colloquialism of cereal is actually cereal in milk. That is the name of that dish.
So I wanted to add here, actually, there are a couple other definition sources that we wanted to mention. One is from the Cambridge Dictionary of Cereal, in which there are two primary definitions. One is a plant that is grown to produce grain, such as cereal crops. And then the other definition is a food that is made from grain and eaten with milk, especially in the morning, such as breakfast cereals. So there's the actual reference to milk. And we also wanted to reference the lexico.com definition, which is a grain used for food such as wheat, oats, or corn, usually cereals, and also a grass producing a cereal grain grown as an agricultural crop, or a breakfast food made from roasted grain, typically eaten with milk. And real quick, I wanted to add one other clarification. In our terms, instead of saying uncooked soups, can we say raw soups? Because I think that's what you're more getting at, Tom, for the not just cold soups, which uncooked can be. It can have a little bit of like not androgynous.
Like calling gazpacho a raw soup.
Yeah, there are things as raw soups and uncooked soups, and those can be confusing because some uncooked soups were previously cooked but then served cold, whereas raw soups are more defined in none of the ingredients are cooked, which I think is what Tom is getting at.
Got it.
Okay, yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, so I believe it is Tom's turn to continue his argument.
Yeah, so all right, I'm going to make a little bit of a leap here, and you'll have to come along. You'll have to come along on the ride with me.
I'm gonna disagree with it, but it's gonna be a ride.
No, you have to come along though.
So we established that adding croutons makes them, even though you would argue that they are considered a garnish, they are part of the dish of soup. I would even argue that extending that to something, say, as like a bread bowl. You get a bread bowl, you put soup in it, you eat the bread as part of the soup. Granted, you can't eat it before you eat the soup, because then your soup will go everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Hard mode.
Yeah.
So, yeah, very, very difficult mode.
Shotgun
Secret
that
unlock,
soup.
if you can eat a bread bowl soup with the bread first, you win an achievement.
It's the Dark Souls version of soup eating.
Yeah, that achievement is called "Why Did You Do This?"
So going from that, if a bread bowl containing soup is considered part of the soup, any dish that contains a liquid is considered soup. An example of this would be, let's say, pizza. And I might get a lot of blowback for this. Pizza is a dough, similar to a bread bowl, that contains pizza sauce that has things on top of it. Pizza sauce is a liquid. Therefore, an entire pizza is soup. Additionally, if you were to cook a hot dog, if you were to boil a hot dog, the hot dog absorbs the water in...
It's funny. Hot dogs are funny. Continue.
Yeah. So, the hot dog becomes the container for what then becomes soup. So anything that's
So are you arguing the hot dogs are actually just a deliverance as a container for hot water?
Hot dog flavored water, I will concede. See, all right, I don't,
So
I don't want to fully stop the train, but I do, I want to address hot dogs when we get back to it.
Okay,
So-
put a pin in hot dogs. Tom, continue.
hot dogs, I'm using it as an example, but anything that contains a liquid in it, when you eat it, is a soup.
Sorry, I want to mute myself.
Sorry, I'm just losing it at Brian.
Yeah, no, it's too much. It's too much.
I did not expect this argument.
Nor did I.
So
But it's not done.
what the argument is getting to is that anything that can contain a liquid, hot dogs, dough, bread, if it contains a liquid, becomes soup. Making cereal, which is a grain, which is not initially a soup, as soon as you put it into a liquid, absorbs the liquid and becomes soup.
All right, so Ian, rebuttal on the things that absorb liquid or hold liquid becoming soup.
Pizza is not soup. Pizza, while I will agree,
Why not?
I will agree that the pizza sauce is a liquid, comes in a jar, molds to its container, like it meets the definitions of liquid, just a high viscosity liquid. However, the pizza is not like the pizza sauce is not the dish. The pizza sauce is sauce. It goes on a solid, goes under other solids, usually, depending on the preparation of the pizza.
Mhm.
Like, it is, if anything, and I am told that this is a terrible term, but I use it all the time, the sauce, in most dishes, is a food lubricant. It is there to help you eat the food and also provide pleasing flavors. Mayonnaise is a classic example. There is, like, why do you put mayo on a sandwich? Because otherwise it's too dry. Makes it easier to eat.
I'm
And
gonna make it so dry for you.
so like I do not agree that pizza is soup. Pizza is a solid that does have a liquid component, but almost all foods do. Like a steak, for example, is a solid. Contains a fair amount of liquid because, bodies contain liquid. Meat contains a fair amount of fluids, which is what makes them so juicy and delicious. But a steak is also not soup. Following your argument, a juicy-ass steak would be a soup.
Oh, it's 100% a soup. Yeah,
It is.
100% a soup.
And that is just not a thing. And I said I'd get back to hot dogs. Same sort of situation. There is more solid matter, more ground meat, what have you, whatever the source of meat in that particular hot dog happens to be, than liquid. So same sort of thing. There is liquid present, and that's one of the things that makes it appealing to eat. And boiled hot dogs are great. I'm from Maine, them red hot dogs. But the hot dog itself is not a soup. I will allow that if you were to then take that hot dog that you boiled in the water, dice that up, put it back in the hot dog water, that is soup. Because that is now a hot dog broth. Nasty
So
though it is.
All right, hold on. Before we continue on this tirade of, so just to for those tuning in now, it seems that the train of thought has gone to bread bowls containing soup suddenly deconstruct or force us to reevaluate the definitions of soup as certain solid edible things containing liquid in them and possibly redefining certain other things as soup, which at this point have included pizza, hot dogs, and now steak as potential
Yep.
soup. So, Tom.
So this brings me to a third point of why the definition of soup is not adequate. There is no restriction on the amount of liquid needed to be included in a soup.
Yes, I agree.
So,
And this
to what
is
you
and
just
this
referenced,
is and this is where we need super form. We need
yes,
to have a
100%.
threshold. I say whatever the liquid constituent of a bowl of clam chowder is the minimum, but that's me. You know, that's the proposal that I would like to put before the House.
I could get behind that proposal. But the issue at hand is that while we agree that that might be a good line to draw, the line isn't drawn. It just says that a liquid needs to be present.
Not
Hold on,
entirely.
Hold on. As moderator, if we're arguing the definitions of soup, I do want to just restate them for anyone in the audience. And I'm going to include a couple of other ones as well. So we started off with Webster, which is a liquid food, especially with a meat, fish, or vegetable stock as a base, and often containing pieces of solid food. Theodora.com says liquid, usually water or milk, in which solid foods have been cooked. Soups can be served hot or cold and may be thick, chunky, smooth, or thin. The Britannica, the opening paragraph in their topic soup article is soup, liquid food prepared by cooking meat, poultry, fish, legumes, or vegetables with seasonings in water, stock, milk, or some other liquid medium. And I'm going to stop it there. So, Tom, I think you were still going.
Yeah, so the thing that all those definitions share is that it has to have a liquid. Whether it's a stock, vegetable stock, a broth, dairy base, or as one of them said, some other liquid. It does not specify how much of it has to be a liquid. It doesn't say that the majority has to be a liquid. It doesn't say that 40% has to be liquid. It just says it has to have liquid.
I would like to disagree with your interpretation of the definitions there. A few, I'll concede not all, but a few, I'd say most, of these definitions often say liquid either as a base or primarily a liquid, or they just say a liquid food. All of these infer that there is more liquid than solid in the dish.
They might infer that, but they don't explicitly state it.
Your argument is the inference that cereal is soup because it's a liquid with stuff in it.
Yes.
All right, so before I pull out something else, and then I'm going to let Ian start the next round. Or actually, no, Ian, is that your full rebuttal to this?
Yeah, I would say that's the full rebuttal. That the definitions all state that the majority or base of soup is liquid. So that definitely throws your pizza and hot dogs argument right out the window.
Okay, so can we do a quick check-in with the patreon.com/PortConMaine poll on the matter?
Yes.
Ian, what's it say?
Regrettably, it's still 4-8 to Tom. Tom is winning with 8 votes for cereal is. I am lagging with 4 votes for it is not.
Are you being doubled?
Yeah, I'm being doubled. It did tick down to 7-5 for against, and then it kicked right back up. And I'm honestly surprised, given the pizza argument, that I am still losing. But here we are.
Hot dog. Hot dog really got me.
I do implore those of you in the PortCon at Home Patreon Discord who actually have control of this vote to please update your votes as your conscience dictates. I'm not telling you how to vote. I am asking that you vote for me.
Yeah.
But that is a request, and you are by no means bound to it, but please.
Alright. Is that an emoji vote or is that an actual poll?
It's
Poll.
it's an emoji poll. Like, the vote is just an empty bowl for cereal is not soup. And the closest I could come to a cereal emoji was a bowl of ramen. So ramen is for cereal is. Empty bowl for is not.
Okay. So I'm going to add something to this argument. This is a late game edition. So there is a cooking glossary on the website what'scookingamerica.net for cooking terms. And it briefly goes into some of the history of soup, and it also adds a term that may be used for argument. So that's why I wanted to introduce this. It says soup. The word soup was originally sop, and it literally meant dipping a slice of bread into a broth. And potage was a word for the contents of the soup. All right. And then the rest of the definition is very similar to the others, which is soup describes both broth and contents, as it means any combination of meat, fish, or vegetables cooked in water or in any other liquid and intended to be eaten. And it may be thick or thin or blah, blah, blah. So that adds that potage part, which seems to be a little bit in our arguments and contention here. So recently, Tom is starting to make the argument that sometimes the potage can be the majority of the dish and still be considered soup instead of the liquid part of it. Is that a decent summary? All right, so Ian, we're at 8:50. How much longer do we want to go? How much more do you guys have?
You've seen us.
Oh my God,
my friend, you have seen us do this for hours, over multiple occasions.
Man, I might start logging into Final Fantasy and getting some goldsmithing done while you do this. All right, so Ian, let's start with you this time.
Okay. I'll go into that SOP argument or definition, which I don't know if Tom read before, but I'm okay. I was hoping you hadn't. And I will say that has two big components that I believe are in the cereal is not soup favor. The first part is that it is a combination. The primary thing you're eating is still the broth. The bread, the sopping, which we've all done with soup, is just a delivery method for the soup. We do not consider the spoon to be part of the soup, but a necessary accessory in order to get it in there. Unless it's a soup that is thin enough to be drunk with a straw, then I will concede you can certainly use a straw to drink soup. But, and again,
that's necessary for certain people in certain medical situations.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got your jaw wired shut, that's how you're eating everything. And, feel better, please. Get better soon.
I continue, Ian.
Yeah, so again, the primary thing with that is, you're still consuming the broth, and that's still using the definition of broth, which is a prepared liquid, usually made by boiling something down to extract the flavor and the nutrients from the inedible parts. And the bread is just a delivery method. Brian, could you actually read the potage definition for me again?
Sure. Hold on. While I'm looking that up, Tom, you look like you had a rebuttal to some of that.
Yeah. So I think Actually, I disagree with Ian that SOP, the definition that it gave, including SOP, saying that SOP is not part of the soup is opposite of what that definition was saying. It was saying that soup is a derivative of this thing, of SOP. I also disagree with considering a spoon to be part of the soup because it is inedible. You cannot, I mean,
They
you
make
would not
they
eat a
make
spoon.
edible spoons
So
specifically for
I will
cereal.
concede that. If you are using an edible spoon, the edible spoon is part of the soup because you are sopping up the soup.
All right.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of trickery with this potage. And looking up certain definitions, including Merriam-Webster and Cambridge, which we've already cited as some of our sources, potage, the only definition given is a thick soup, or thick soup, especially one made from vegetables.
Okay,
So
that's a
maybe this term
that's a
is not one.
self-referential definition. So that's
Yeah.
that's
And-
just
and
that's
the
describing
lexico.
that's describing a kind of soup. So I guess that
Yeah.
doesn't really.
I would be willing to agree on the definition of potage being, and this definition could be wrong, but for the time being, it is just the ingredients in the soup.
See,
Alright,
there I disagree. I think like that definition of potage is just describing a variety of soup, much like you define miso or chicken noodle. I think it's just describing a hearty vegetable soup.
Right. Sorry, that definition is. I was talking about in the original section that Brian was reading, where it mentioned sop and then the potage.
Gotcha.
I'm looking up the etymology of it now, but continue, Tom.
Oh, other than that,
Okay.
I think that's a standard definition for it that we can move forward with, unless we have a specific one or we want to be referencing that specific dish.
I think that's my argument with the sop is that is very similar to the bread bowl in that it's just a delivery method, albeit an edible one.
But see, I think it actually lends credence to the argument that since soup is derived from this action, that the bread bowl being soup makes sense.
Now, my disagreement there is that this was the original ways that we ate soup was that like the common man's way of eating soup, especially back in the Middle Ages, was you took stale bread, you carved a hole out in it, made yourself a bread bowl, and that's how you ate your soup because you usually didn't have a bowl. So I'm not an anthropologist, so I do not know which came first, the bowl or the trencher. I don't know.
Bowl or the soup?
Bowl? No. Soup was a very, very early human discovery. The first time we accidentally dropped a bunch of meat into some water, we were like, let's cook this.
But how did you cook it without a bowl?
In a skull.
So
that's true. I don't know if that's true.
I concede. I don't know.
I don't think that's true.
It's a hollow, rounded vessel, so it's conceivable.
Telling you. So
this is why I'm losing. It's 4-9 to Tom, right? It's 9-4 to Tom right now.
So we have more people turning out for votes, and they're still in favor of the other side.
Like, when everybody remembered that the vote was pinned at the top of the discussion thread, it like fluctuated rapidly, and then somehow you're still winning. I'm just not making my arguments persuasively enough. Like, I need to be a little bit more ridiculous and say that, like, I don't know. I got nothing. I can't think the way you do.
I mean, I think the problem with your arguments is you're arguing based on your personal opinions rather than the definition of soup.
My personal opinions have not entered this debate yet, as I am not a fan of breakfast cereal in general. I eat it too slowly, so it always gets soggy and nasty.
Well, yeah, if you don't eat it in like 30 seconds, it gets soggy and nasty.
And that's work. And those of you who know me, I'm not about that. No, I just do not agree that cereal is soup because of the primary arguments of preparation. The milk is not prepared as in a broth or base or stock. And the cereal itself, while obviously literally half of the dish of the breakfast cereal dish, the cereal in milk dish, and cannot be discounted as part of the dish, is, while being prepared, is not being added to a prepared liquid medium. Because you can add, like, we're not arguing whether or not the cereal is prepared, because it is. It's usually roasted or toasted or formed in some way. It's usually processed and then, made into cute little shapes. But my argument that a processed food added to a liquid does not soup make.
But it is a processed liquid.
Milk is not a processed liquid. Well, processed, but not prepared.
So you are saying the difference in industrially preparing or processing milk and processing cereal grains to make cereal are so fundamentally different that one counts as being prepared and one does not count as being prepared.
Yes, I would definitely say that the process for preparing milk for human consumption, as opposed to preparing cereal grains to human consumption, is very different.
But it's different enough that you do not consider them the same thing. One is processing, one is preparing.
Yes, that is the definition of different. Not the same.
Okay, so I'd like to pose a question, and then maybe we should move to final arguments and wrap up. So, a question just going through my mind is, in considering the preparation of soup base and or contents, and also considering the existence and acceptance of raw soup, does cereal, once the cereal contents are added to the milk, make it more aligned with the generally accepted definitions of soup?
Yes.
What do you think?
I would tentatively agree that it does create a soup-like dish. However, Tom does not agree that the definition of soup is an actual definition of soup.
Correct.
Ergo, cereal in milk is not soup.
So the basis of the argument being that the definition of soup is faulty and untrustworthy, therefore
invalidating cereal as soup.
Which then opens up the doors to what isn't soup.
Yeah. So I think you misrepresent my argument a little bit, but maybe I conveyed it incorrectly. The definitions of soup are incomplete.
Okay,
They're not necessarily wrong. They are just incomplete. They're missing parameters that are needed to be able to consistently and successfully define what soup is. Yeah. There are examples. There are examples that, such as gazpacho, and we talked about a few other ones, that sort of break the rules that we had talked about. One that was brought up earlier, Ian, you mentioned that soup has to be a certain percentage liquid. Stews have generally have very little liquid in them. They are mostly the potage, the ingredients in the stew. But a stew is a type of soup.
Agreed,
So,
it is a type of soup, yes.
So the definitions of soup are too undefined. Therefore,
definitions.
Therefore, it opens the door to things such as cereal in milk being soup.
Is that your final kind of argument wrap up, or?
Yeah, I think that's sort of my final argument.
Okay. And Ian.
I still stand by the fact that adding a processed food to milk, which does not have to be processed, does not make it soup. Similarly, like, my argument there being, like, water. Water is a liquid. Water is processed, especially if it's going through a filter or civic, water systems. Would you consider, Tom, breakfast cereal added to water soup?
Yes, because some of the definitions of soup say specifically and other liquids. It's not necessarily strictly broth or dairy or broth or milk or stock.
Yeah, specifically, even the Theodora.com definition is liquid, usually water or milk, which is the first words in that definition. So,
thank you. Additionally, or going back to what you had mentioned, where you don't believe taking a processed food makes it soup. Processed soups, such as Campbell's or I can't think of the other brand,
Progresso.
the other big brand, Progresso. Those are processed foods that are soups.
To that argument, I do want to differentiate the difference between processed and prepared. Preparing meaning the general definition of cooking. Heating, adding ingredients, reducing other ingredients to create a thing, to create a food. Campbell's chicken noodle soup is definitely prepared via cooking, albeit at an industrial level. Whereas milk does not have to be prepared and is not actually prepared. It is processed. Milk is not prepared. The cereal is prepared. The cereal is cooked. And adding a cooked food to a liquid that is not prepared via cooking does not make soup. There is the base of, in my definition, what I consider makes soup, to reword it for you. The base, the liquid, must be prepared, cooked. And as milk in breakfast cereal is not cooked, I do not consider it to be soup.
So okay.
all right. So what's it say in the Patreon voting right now?
There has been a development. I'm still losing. 9-4. Still losing.
Sweet.
But the letters S, O, U, and P each have 3 votes alongside. So while I am not losing to the letters that make up soup individually, I am losing cumulatively.
I'm going to count that as...
You cannot count that as 12 extra votes, Tom.
12 extra votes for me. So I believe I have 21 votes for cereal is soup.
No, you do not.
That's the stream. Everyone have a good night. No.
Listen, I'll be the one as moderator. I'll be the one to say whether the stream is over or not.
Now, see, I can confirm, looking at the people who clicked the emojis, this is not an anonymous poll, by the way. I can see that the same 4 people have each voted for a letter of soup. So, if you want to count it extra, and you still can't, it's only 4, because now they've all voted again.
So maybe, are there any questions in chat?
Oh god,
Yeah.
so many.
Anything we want to refer to that?
There is like a whole
That we want to
there's a
refer?
whole sub debate going on around our debates. One of the popular questions that has come up a couple times is a popsicle frozen soup? I disagree. It is frozen. It's a frozen juice, usually fruit juice or just sugar and water.
I would agree that a popsicle is frozen soup.
So, hold on.
There's
So,
also
we're talking
there's
about
also somehow what gets me is
So-
there's a lot of disagreement with you and your pizza is soup shit, but
Yeah.
language.
language.
So, consideration is the whole purpose of a popsicle is that it is frozen solid, correct? So,
Yes, because like that's the accepted definition of popsicle is a frozen liquid or juice.
so soup is liquid at room temperature, right?
Or
But if
above
you
room temperature.
Consumption period.
But if you leave a popsicle out at room temperature, it becomes a liquid.
That's what I'm saying. So, are we defining what is or isn't soup based on its natural state and room temperature,
No.
or are we considering it at what point is it consumed or designed to be consumed?
I don't think either, to be honest.
I would argue that none of the definitions mention that it has to be liquid at the time it is consumed or at room temperature.
Yeah, the state of matter is not the issue with soup, as long as that matter is approaching liquid by Tom's definition, and is liquid by my definition.
Yeah, I mean, I think the definitions of hot or cold soup, which has been a big part of this debate, is basically hot is anything above room temperature, and cold is anything that is room temperature or below. Would we agree on that?
Yeah?
I'm going to say yes. No, but also yes.
No, but yes.
There is, let's see, there's a lot of appreciation for this sort of content. Thank you. We're happy to deliver. Admittedly, this is one of the things that I enjoy most about PortCon is this sort of crap.
That's good.
Let's see. I will also, to the popsicle argument, I will say that you can definitely make a soup popsicle. Like, you can make a popsicle out of beef broth or what have you. If you want a savory popsicle, you do you.
It's a weird choice, but
you know,
have at it.
have at it. Like,
But that sort of lends to the argument that frozen things, anything frozen that can melt, can become soup.
so, an ice cube, just an ice cube, frozen water, thawed, can become soup. Without any additions whatsoever.
Well, I mean, it was...
Man.
I have to think on that one, because it was technically prepared. You froze it first.
So that it can become water again.
But then
I
it just
will
becomes water.
concede that freezing is definitely a method of preparation. Ice cream is prepared via freezing.
But it doesn't do anything.
but it's not preparing. Yeah, it's like
The molecules
that's to use
expand.
that same argument. Boiling water to produce steam, and then distilling that steam back into liquid.
Makes it soup.
No, it just makes it water.
That just purifies the water. Is what you're saying.
Yeah.
The natural state. So, hold on. Talking weather cycle, the water cycle, which
If you do it,
water
if you do it in the
is
right direction fast enough, it just sublimates from solid to
rains.
gas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The sun beats down on the water evaporates, turns into clouds, condensation happens, and then precipitation. That process is making water soup. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Okay. Nature is preparing water as soup. This just blows the doors open on this whole thing.
Trying to go
Yep.
high
Questions?
high up here.
So going off of that, and this might be as controversial as the pizza argument.
Give me strength.
Ice is the solid form of water.
Yeah.
Yes, that is a scientific definition of what ice is.
So we just established that when ice melts, it becomes soup.
I mean,
So if
You
you can leave,
establish
you have posited that. We have not established that whatsoever.
Yeah,
sorry,
I don't think
Yeah.
that's been
we
established.
did not necessarily establish that, but
We talked about it
we
just
talked
now.
about it. So based on that logic, if you can leave a grain out so that it goes bad and eventually becomes, rots and becomes a liquid, it has become soup.
No, because then it will not be edible. And fermentation is a different process than rotting. I will put that right out right now.
But does the definition of soup anywhere say that it has to be edible?
I
Checking.
believe it does.
It does use the term food,
Mm-hmm.
which implies and infers edibility.
Yeah.
Usually, liquid food is in just about every version of our definitions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so here's sort of a sub-debate that happened in chat, and I regrettably already know the answer. Tom, your position on oatmeal.
Oatmeal is soup.
Oh, goddamn.
100% soup. It meets every definition of soup.
Sigh.
It's if you want to go by one of the more stricter ones, it is a solid. I should say, if you are talking about not raw oats,
No, yeah,
but
like
prepared dish of
oat,
oatmeal.
yeah, a thing of oatmeal.
It is a solid prepared in a base of water.
But for oatmeal,
For oatmeal.
See, in that regard, I will, and this is gonna lose me even more votes, so what do I care at this point? I will accept that oatmeal, especially hot oatmeal, is a soup. Because there is an additional step of preparation that happens. Very few people, I'm not going to say no one, because I know someone does, but very few people just put oats in water and call that good. Like, to prepare them further, you must cook them. Like, either through heating the water beforehand or heating them together as a unit, whatever your particular preparation is. That makes it a soup to me. Whereas a normal breakfast cereal where it's just prepared grains added to water or milk, usually milk, does not make soup.
So the summation of your argument is that cereal is not cereal, not excluding oatmeal, is not soup because it does not require enough preparation.
Yes. Yes, that is definitely the core of one of my arguments. That extra step of preparation of the liquid or the parts as a whole is what makes soup. Otherwise, it is just an emulsion of a prepared solid in a liquid.
Hmm. Any other strange or pressing questions going on or sub-debates in the Patreon?
There were a few questions about individual kinds of soup, like lentil-based soups or stews. Those are soups.
Yep.
You have to cook lentils or they're hard as rocks. Same with like a few different kinds of soups have been brought up. The popsicle argument came and went a couple times. Let's see. Yeah, a lot of people are just calling oatmeal thick soup. Thick with two
Yep.
C's.
Yes. Very good.
Like a
A
stew or gumbo.
Mr. Ryan York is positing that pasteurized milk is prepared. I disagree.
I would agree.
I disagree, but I can't win in a direct argument against either of you. Maybe that's what we should do. Maybe we should get Ryan and Tom in on this. That would never friggin' end.
Just keep going.
But are they on the same
24
side?
hours
though?
stream.
More or less.
Yeah, then
Yeah.
they can't fight each other.
I mean, I can get more extreme in my opinions at soup.
Regrettably, yes, you can.
All right, is there anything else we want to posit before we
Before we let the votes
retire?
total out.
Yeah.
I think we can just make final summations.
Closing arguments?
Yeah.
Or closing statements?
Yeah.
Not closing arguments, closing statements.
Yeah, we've already done closing arguments. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's start. We started with Ian, so Ian, why don't you start with your closing statement?
Okay. So yeah, I say that cereal is not soup because it does not require the level of preparation that defines what soup is. It either doesn't require the preparation of the liquid base, be it broth, stock, dairy product, what have you, and just the addition of a prepared solid, such as cereal or a hot dog.
Needed. The definitions are inadequate and do not cover foods that could be considered.
Okay. Oh, hang on. Tom, I am actually going to have you go ahead and reiterate your closing argument. Because
Did I cut out?
No, you didn't, but the stream hitched up for a second. So I don't know how much of your closing argument got cut. So in the name of fairness, go ahead and just repeat that.
Sure.
Roll again.
So, I would argue that cereal is soup because the definitions of soup are too vague to encompass everything that we consider traditionally to be soup, such as things like gazpacho, which are raw soups, are not covered. And cereal, from my view, falls into the category of raw soup. And since the traditional definitions of soup do not cover that, the definitions are incomplete, for which we need super form. Yeah, and now I'm rambling. But cereal is not soup. The definition of soup is too vague to rule out cereal as being soup, and therefore it is soup.
Okay.
Well, I guess that'll wrap it up. Viewers get to decide who is right and who is wrong in this argument. Again, if you want to be part of that decision, go into patreon.com/PortConMaine, and you can vote in the poll posted there once you get behind the donation wall, and you can help decide which one of these made the more compelling argument and chime in to say, hey, did one of them actually convince you the other way if you'd started on this argument on a certain side? So thank you guys for tuning in. We hope you guys are being safe and having a good summer despite the crazy conditions we are in. And we hope that you guys enjoy the rest of the events posted in our schedule in the summer here for PortCon at home. So thank you guys, and have a great rest of your summer.
Thank
Stay
you.
cool, stay
Stay
safe, and
cool.
enjoy your soup.
And
Enjoy yo soup.
just the final votes that I'm seeing, because I'm not seeing a lot of updates happening here. People have locked in. It is 4 votes for cereal is not soup. 9 votes for cereal is soup. And in a surprise upset, there is a 3-way tie between S, O, and U with 5 votes. And somehow P got left behind and is tied with me with 4 votes.
Nobody likes the P.
No one likes the letter P. What?
It's the least important letter.
Yeah.
No, well, otherwise you just have Sue.
Yeah, soup.
Like
Soup.
sous chef.
Soup. That's got an S at
Which
the
has
end.
a silent S. But it's still silent.
But yes, no. But yeah, thanks everybody. We may do more of these as we go on, if PortCon at home, but if not, please look forward to a very special filler panel at PortCon 2021. What is a salad?
Or what isn't soup?
What isn't
Yeah,
soup?
plot twist. Salads are soup.
God, no.
We didn't
No.
get there, but they're
No,
soup.
no. No matter how much dressing you put on there, it is not soup.
All right, so thank you, everybody.
Yes.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Have a nice night.